Long ago, under the scorching sun of the southern plantations, where life was measured not by hours, but by the shadow of a whip, people survived by creating food from what others considered garbage. They had no choice, but they had the power to turn suffering into flavor and hunger into ingenuity. This is the story of those who cooked not for luxury, but for survival. It is the story of 25 dishes born in captivity, but that have become symbols of survival and memory. Cornmeal mush, a humble dish that became a symbol of endurance and hope. Born from scarcity, it offered comfort when little else could. On southern plantations, enslaved people rarely had fresh meat or milk, but cornmeal was always near. They boiled it with water and a pinch of salt, sometimes a drop of molasses if luck allowed. Once cooled, the mush turned solid, ready to fry on a cast iron pan under the first light of dawn. The scent of corn and smoke mingled with morning dew, a quiet beginning to another long day. It wasn't a feast, but every bite held memory of freedom, of home, of something once theirs. Over time, women turned survival into creativity, mixing herbs, berries, or syrup. And when night fell and the cicadas sang, the smell of corn over fire became more than food, it was the breath of resilience, the taste of dignity in the hardest of lives. Ash cakes, simple cornmeal flatbreads baked directly in the ashes, and therein lay their meaning, bread from the embers. When no oven, no wheat, no fat were available, only earth, water and fire remained. They mixed coarse cornmeal with water into a dough, shaped small flat cakes and gently pressed them into warm coals, covering them with a light layer of ash so the heat would bake them slowly and evenly. Within minutes a crust formed, darkened by soot, while the inside set into a dense, sustaining crumb. The scent was a haunting blend of roasted corn, wood smoke, and dawn on the plantation. Ash cakes were food born of necessity, yet they were more than mere survival. In each movement, from calloused palms to weary eyes, was memory of home, recipes carried across the ocean. Women learned to read the fire, where heat was fiercest, where to brush off ash, when the cake was ready. Often they would flavor it with wild herbs, a drizzle of molasses, or crumble it into soft beans, turning scarcity into culinary wisdom. At dusk, when a blue haze rose above the cabins, these cakes became more than nourishment, they were proof of endurance. Each broken piece whispered, "We remain. We resist. We remember." Ash cakes, bread from ash, bread of resilience, a simple loaf that keeps a story alive. Cowpeas and rice, a simple, sustaining dish that fed those who labored from dawn to dusk. On plantations it was more than food, it was a thread connecting memories of African villages to the harsh realities of the New World. Women emptied sacks of dried cowpeas, washed handfuls of rice in wooden tubs, and set a heavy iron cauldron over the fire. Into that pot went water, a handful of beans, a scoop of rice and, if they were lucky, a scrap of salt pork, simmered for hours until the steam filled the yard. Around the pot the community gathered, elders watching the embers, women trading low songs and whispers, children stretching for spoons. Each plain spoonful was sustenance and solidarity, a taste that warmed bodies and bound spirits. Cowpeas and rice carried the cookery of Africa into new soil, their methods were adapted, preserved, and made resilient. This dish stands as proof, even in bondage, people kept memory alive, one shared bowl at a time. Molasses water, a simple drink of survival. When the midday sun burned across the fields, workers paused only for a moment to take a sip of thick, dark sweetness. Molasses water, a humble mixture of blackstrap molasses stirred into cool well water. For those laboring under the sun, it was the only taste that carried memory, the sugarcane of distant Africa now turned to bittersweet endurance. Poured into clay mugs or tin cups, it brought a fleeting relief, the sweetness mixing with sweat and dust. Sometimes women came to the fields carrying jugs wrapped in cloth, children balanced on hips. The men lifted their heads, grateful for that one cooling swallow. It was no luxury, just a moment of life preserved, a reminder that even in hardship, sweetness could survive. Molasses water, the taste of endurance, the echo of resilience. Collard greens, more than just food, it's a symbol of survival and resilience. On plantations where meager diets often consisted of the cheapest and most available ingredients, collard greens were a true gift. They were harvested from gardens that slaves often cultivated in their own limited free time, or received as part of their meager rations. These large, dark green leaves were simmered for long hours, often with a small piece of salt pork or smoked meat to add flavor. The preparation process demanded patience. The leaves were thoroughly washed, tough stems removed, and then slow-cooked. The aroma of the simmering greens would spread throughout the community, signaling that a meal was ready. This was a dish that nourished bodies, but more importantly, fortified spirits. In every leaf, in every sip of broth, lay memories of the homeland, traditions passed down through generations, and the unseen bond that united people in the face of adversity. Collard greens became a part of culinary heritage, a testament to how, even in the harshest conditions, people found ways to preserve their culture, their identity, and their dignity. Salt pork was a cornerstone of the slave diet on American plantations. It wasn't just food, it was a vital source of calories, fat, and salt, helping to endure grueling labor under the scorching sun. These pieces were often small, sometimes scraps left over from better cuts intended for the white masters. Yet, for the slaves, even these humble scraps were a valuable resource. They were boiled, fried, or added to other dishes like rice or greens to impart flavor and nutrition. The fat rendered from the meat was often used as the primary cooking oil, giving every dish a unique, albeit often pungent, aroma. Salt pork was not just sustenance, it was a symbol of scarcity, but also a symbol of survival. It served as a stark reminder of plantation life's harsh realities, yet also of people's capacity to find sustenance and even flavor in the most unfavorable conditions. This dish is a living testament to how those deprived of everything utilized every available resource to keep living, support each other, and preserve glimmers of hope. Turnip green soup was another dish deeply associated with the cuisine of slaves on plantations. Turnip greens, like collards, were an accessible and nutritious green that was often grown in their own gardens. Their large, slightly bitter leaves were simmered until tender, creating an aromatic, slightly hearty soup. Often, remnants of salt pork or even its bones were added to this soup to give the dish depth of flavor and additional nutrition. The cooking process itself was simple. The greens were thoroughly washed, chopped, and slowly simmered in water. Sometimes, a pinch of salt or pepper was added if available. This soup was not just a source of vitamins and minerals, but also a warming, comforting dish on cooler days or after hard labor. The aroma wafting from the cabins was familiar and soothing. Turnip green soup is a symbol of how people found ways to create hearty and flavorful meals from the simplest ingredients, preserving traditions and supporting each other through shared food. This dish embodies resilience, ingenuity, and the inseparable bond that existed among people who shared a common destiny. Sweet potato stew held a special place in the diet of slaves on plantations. Sweet potatoes were relatively easy to grow and yielded a generous harvest, making them a reliable source of carbohydrates and vitamins. This was a dish that warmed, satisfied, and provided energy for hard labor. To prepare the stew, sweet potatoes were cut into large pieces and simmered with a small amount of water. Often a little salt or pepper was added, if available, as well as scraps of salt pork or bones for flavor. Sometimes other available vegetables, such as onions or greens, were added to the stew. It was a simple yet nourishing dish that was cooked in a large cauldron and shared among members of the community. Sweet potato stew is a symbol of inventiveness and the ability to create tasty and satisfying food from a limited set of ingredients. It was a dish that strengthened bonds between people, reminded them of home, and gave them the strength to endure another day. In every piece of sweet potato, in every spoonful of broth, one could feel care, hope, and the unseen connection that united people in the face of hardship. Hoe cakes, cornmeal flatbreads cooked on a hoe. In times when even bread was a luxury, African Americans on southern plantations created a simple meal to survive. Cornmeal, water, a pinch of salt, mixed and cooked over open fire on the blade of an iron hoe. Hoe cakes were not just food, they were a testament to creativity, endurance, and the will to live. As the day ended and exhaustion settled in, women lit small fires near the cabins, resting the hoe in the coals and pouring batter onto its hot surface. The scent of corn and smoke filled the air, a faint reminder of home. These small cakes brought warmth and brief joy, shared among families, between songs and quiet laughter. Hoe cakes, the taste of resilience. Dishes made from wild okra and herbs represented another example of how African Americans on plantations utilized the gifts of nature for their sustenance. Okra, a plant with pods that develop a characteristic mucilaginous texture when cooked, was widespread in the southern regions. It was often gathered from the wild or grown in small garden patches. Combined with various wild herbs that the slaves knew how to gather, okra could form the basis of simple yet nutritious meals. These could include stewed vegetables, soups, or even a type of gumbo. The use of herbs added aroma to the dishes and possibly served medicinal purposes. The cooking method was typically straightforward. Vegetables and herbs were boiled or simmered. The lack of sophisticated spices was compensated by the natural taste of the products and the knowledge of which plants were edible and beneficial. Wild okra and herbs were not just food, they were a symbol of a deep connection to the land, knowledge passed down through generations, and the ability to find sustenance where others saw only wilderness. This dish embodies ingenuity, reliance on nature, and the culinary traditions that emerged in harsh conditions yet retained vitality and flavor. Field pea cakes were another testament to the resourcefulness of slaves in utilizing available resources. Field peas, or black-eyed peas, were an important crop on plantations, grown for direct consumption and for various dishes. From boiled and mashed peas, mixed with cornmeal or other available binding agents, simple cakes were made. These field pea cakes could serve as a main dish or a dietary supplement, adding protein and nutrition. They were often fried in a pan with a small amount of fat rendered from salt pork. The taste was earthy, with a slight sweetness from the peas. These cakes were not just food, they were a symbol of survival, the ability to use every crumb, every available product, to maintain strength and live another day. Field pea cakes embody resilience, ingenuity, and a deep understanding of how to create something filling and nutritious from the most humble gifts of the earth. This dish is a reflection of culinary traditions born in harsh conditions, yet retaining their essence and importance. Molasses bread was another important component of the plantation diet. Molasses, a byproduct of sugarcane processing, was relatively accessible and served as the primary sweetener, as well as a source of iron and other minerals. Bread was made from it, often dense, moist, and with a rich, caramel flavor. Recipes could vary, they might include cornmeal, remnants of other grains, or simply flour, water, and molasses. This bread could be baked in ovens if available, or even under improvised conditions. Molasses bread was not just a treat, it provided essential energy and was a comfort in a harsh life. Its sweet flavor contrasted with the overall scarcity of the diet. This bread symbolizes how people found sweet moments in life by utilizing the most accessible ingredients. It embodies ingenuity, the ability to find comfort and joy in simple things, and the importance of traditions that helped maintain spirit in the most difficult circumstances. Molasses bread is the taste of history, a sweet trace of the past. Chitterlings, or pig intestines, is a dish that often evokes strong emotions and is an integral part of African American culinary history, especially on plantations. Chitterlings are essentially pig intestines that were meticulously cleaned, boiled, and then often fried. This cooking process was long and labor-intensive, requiring considerable effort to remove any unpleasant odors and render them palatable. Chitterlings were among the products left after more valuable parts of the animal, meat, fatback, were taken or sold. For slaves, they were a source of protein obtained through immense labor. Their taste and texture are very distinct, and their preparation required knowledge and experience. Chitterlings are not just food, they are a symbol of survival, a deep understanding of how to utilize every possible product, even those that seemed unappealing. This dish embodies incredible resilience, ingenuity, and the willingness to adapt to the harshest conditions, transforming leftovers into a valuable source of sustenance. The story of chitterlings is one of finding ways to eat, while preserving culinary traditions and spirit. Fish from the bayou was a vital addition to the slave diet, especially in regions where plantations bordered swampy lands, rivers, and bayous. Access to this fish, often of less esteemed varieties, was one of the few ways to diversify a meager menu consisting mainly of grains and greens. Fish were caught using primitive methods, by hand, with crude nets, or homemade traps. This foraging required not only skill but also stealth, as hunting and fishing activities were often restricted by the plantation plan. The caught fish might be roasted over an open fire or simmered with the same wild herbs and vegetable scraps. Bayou fish symbolizes a deep, instinctive connection to the natural environment and the ability to utilize its resources for survival. This dish reflects ingenuity and resilience, the capacity to find sustenance even in places that others perceived as dangerous. Stories of fishing and catches were passed down orally, becoming part of the folk culture and a way to maintain spirit in the struggle for each day. Cane syrup pudding was one of the sweetest and perhaps most desired dishes available to slaves. Sugarcane was often grown on plantations, and the syrup derived from it was more accessible than refined sugar. This thick, rich syrup formed the base for the pudding. It was mixed with cornmeal, water, and sometimes scraps of bread or other grains to create a dense, sweet mass. The pudding could be boiled or baked. For slaves, it was a delicacy, a reminder of the sweetness in life that was so rarely accessible. Cane syrup pudding symbolizes not only sweet comfort but also the ability to create something pleasant from products grown through their own labor, albeit under the conditions of slavery. This dish embodies ingenuity in using available resources to derive pleasure and energy, as well as the importance of simple joys that helped maintain spirit. It is the taste of history, the sweet legacy of sugarcane that has endured for centuries. Cornbread with ash is another unique dish that reflects the survival and ingenuity of slaves on plantations. Ash, left over from the fire, was used as a leavening agent, replacing yeast or other modern leaveners that might not have been available. Cornmeal, water, and ash were the main ingredients of this simple but essential bread. Sometimes a small amount of salt or fat was added if possible. The preparation process was simple. The ingredients were mixed, and the dough was baked on flat stones over a fire or in makeshift ovens. The ash imparted a characteristic flavor to the bread, which could be slightly bitter, but when combined with other foods, it provided necessary calories and nutrition. Cornbread with ash embodies the art of survival, the ability to use every available resource, even those that seemed useless. This dish is a symbol of resilience, resourcefulness, and the capacity to transform even ashes into a means of sustenance. Cornbread with ash is the taste of the past, a memory of a time when one had to be ingenious to survive. Dandelion salad was yet another testament to the resourcefulness of slaves in utilizing what was readily available in their environment. Dandelions, often seen as weeds, grew everywhere, and their young leaves were edible and could provide a source of vitamins and minerals so lacking in the diet. Dandelion salad was prepared by gathering young dandelion leaves, carefully washing them to remove bitterness, and mixing them with other available ingredients, such as vinegar, if available, or scraps of other vegetables. This dish was especially important in the spring, when fresh greens were scarce. Dandelion salad not only enriched the meager diet but also represented a display of knowledge about nature and the ability to find sustenance where others saw only weeds. It is a symbol of survival, respect for nature, and the ingenuity needed for survival. Dandelion salad is the taste of freedom, however illusory, contained in simple greens, grown on land that was both their home and their prison. Roasted groundnuts, or peanuts, were yet another important source of sustenance for slaves. Peanuts were relatively easy to cultivate, and they could be roasted to make them more palatable and easily digestible. Roasted peanuts provided essential calories and protein. Roasting, a process that required time and skill, often occurred over an open fire, and the aroma of roasted peanuts became one of the iconic smells on plantations. Roasted groundnuts symbolize simplicity and accessibility, the ability to derive nutrition from simple crops. It embodies ingenuity and skill in food preparation, even with limited resources. Roasted peanuts are the taste of survival, a reminder of the value of humble foods and the mastery of simple cooking techniques that helped people remain strong and healthy under difficult conditions. It is a humble tribute to endurance. Leftover stew is a dish that speaks of a profound understanding of the value of every gram of food and the art of survival. In plantation settings, where the diet was extremely meager, nothing was discarded. Every scrap of vegetable, leftover meat or fish, even the water in which things were boiled, could be used to create a new dish. Leftover stew was essentially a continuously replenished pot into which new ingredients were added as they became available. It could be a stew made from wild herbs, root vegetables, grain scraps, small fish, or even bones. The cooking process was continuous. The stew might simmer for weeks, developing an increasingly rich flavor and nutritional value. Leftover stew embodies incredible ingenuity, resilience, and the ability to use whatever was available to sustain life. This dish is a symbol of how people found ways to cope, turning leftovers into a valuable source of energy. It is not just food, it is a testament to survival, part of a culinary tradition that helped preserve not only the body but also the spirit during the most difficult times. Watermelon rind pickles are a prime example of incredible ingenuity and the ability to utilize every possible resource. Watermelons, abundant on summer plantations, offered not only sweet flesh but also a thick, white rind that would typically be discarded. However, slaves found a way to pickle this rind, turning it into a sweet, crisp delicacy. The rind was peeled of its green skin, cut into cubes or strips, and then simmered in molasses or sugarcane syrup, with spices like cinnamon or cloves added. The result was something akin to a preserve or candied fruit. Watermelon rind pickles symbolize the ability to find value where others see none, transforming waste into a delicacy. This dish embodies resilience, resourcefulness, and the ability to find sweet moments even in the most unexpected places. The story of watermelon rind pickles is one of people, deprived of everything, finding joy and flavor while preserving their culinary traditions and spirit. Catfish soup was a dish that originated on the banks of the rivers and swamps that surrounded the plantations. Catfish was one of the few sources of protein available to the slaves. It was boiled whole, with the head and bones, to create a rich broth. Wild herbs, a little onion, and garlic were added, and cornmeal was used to thicken the soup. This soup was more than just a meal, it was a testament to the slaves' ingenuity and their connection to nature. Every spoonful was a reminder of their resilience and their ability to find life even in the most challenging circumstances. The taste of catfish is the taste of the river, of freedom and strength that flowed in the hearts of people who survived through their spirit and nature. Molasses candy was one of the few sources of sweetness available to slaves. Molasses, or treacle, was a byproduct of sugarcane processing, and although its taste could be bitter, it was a valuable source of calories and sugar. Making this candy was simple. Molasses was boiled until thickened, then poured onto a flat surface to harden, after which it was broken into pieces. Sometimes a little flour or other available ingredients were added. Molasses candy was a rare treat that offered instant pleasure and energy. This dish embodies resourcefulness in using available materials to create something sweet and desirable. It symbolizes the ability to find small joys and comfort in a harsh life, while preserving spirit and tradition. This candy is a sweet echo of history, a reminder of how even from simple, bitter products, something that brought much-needed sweetness could be created. Cracked cornmeal was a staple of the diet for many, including slaves. It was grown in vast quantities and served as a versatile ingredient, used for porridges, hoe cakes, grits, bread, and as a base for many other dishes. The process of cracking corn was labor-intensive, often done manually with a mortar and pestle or on primitive mills. Cracked cornmeal symbolizes simplicity, accessibility, and survival. It was food that nourished, provided strength, and was an integral part of daily life. Despite its simplicity, it represents ingenuity in preparing filling meals from available grains and the resilience to obtain sustenance against all odds. This meal is a symbol of an unshakable connection to the land and its gifts, and a culinary tradition that helped people survive and maintain their spirit. Okra gumbo is not just a dish, it is a culinary and cultural thread connecting the past to the present. Gumbo is said to have originated in America with the arrival of slaves, and okra, an integral part of it, was also brought from Africa. Preparing gumbo was a complex process, requiring time, patience, and the skill to combine diverse ingredients that could be obtained, from fish and game to vegetables and spices. Okra was used as a thickener, giving the dish its characteristic viscosity. Okra gumbo is a symbol of adaptation, resilience, and the preservation of cultural traditions. It embodies resourcefulness in using local ingredients and African culinary techniques to create a dish that became a cornerstone of Southern cuisine. It is more than just food, it is a story passed down through generations, the taste of home, which was both a source of comfort and a reminder of a difficult journey. Gumbo is a symbol of community, celebration, and survival. Boiled greens with lard is a dish that exemplifies culinary resourcefulness and the ability to derive maximum benefit from the simplest of ingredients. Green leafy vegetables such as collard greens, mustard greens, or beet greens were relatively abundant and grew readily. They were boiled in water, often with the addition of pork fat scraps, lard, which provided flavor, aroma, and essential fat that was scarce in the diet. Boiled greens with lard symbolizes the ability to find value in what is available and transform simple ingredients into a nutritious meal. It is a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and the ability to extract flavor and energy from the earth. This dish embodies simplicity, heartiness, and a connection to nature, as well as culinary traditions that helped people survive and maintain their strength under difficult conditions. It is the taste of the earth and resilience. Despite the brutality of slavery, African Americans endured. Their culinary traditions, born of necessity, became part of their heritage. Every dish symbolized resilience, hope, and the will to live. It's a story of preserving spirit, traditions, and dignity.